big foreign policy challenge that India will be facing. Is there a thaw in India-US ties or not? Well, US President Donald Trump is doing what Donald Trump does, keeps everyone guessing. He's blown hot and cold over the last 24 hours. In a post on Truth Social, he has praised the Indo-US partnership, praised Prime Minister Modi, and said that trade negotiations with India were continuing, and has expressed optimism about an eventual breakthrough. And he says he will be speaking to Prime Minister Modi in the coming weeks. Mr. Modi has responded by echoing the optimism. The Prime Minister saying talks will unlock the limitless potential of bilateral talks. Now that's the good news. The not so good news is that Donald Trump is also pushing the European Union to join the United States in slapping tariffs on China and India of 100%, arguing that these are the two biggest importers of Russian crude oil. Remember, all of this is coming even as the Ukraine war continues to escalate. NATO fighter jets have shot down multiple Russian drones that violated Polish airspace during an attack on Ukraine. I'm joined at this moment by Raymond Vickery, Senior Associate Chair on India and Emerging Asia at Washington, D.C. Appreciate your joining us, Mr. Vickery. What's your sense? How are we to now look at Donald Trump 24 hours? One moment says 100% tariffs on India and China. Next moment says that India and the United States are about to resume their trade talks.
Well, thanks very much for having me. I think it's useful to step back and understand that the relationship between the U.S. and India is very, very important for both of these great democracies. That having been said, in order to have a plan for waging peace and prosperity, you have to have a strategy and you have to have partners. Unfortunately, President Trump does not subscribe to that. He sees things in his egoistic, narcissistic kind of way, that everything is like a real estate transaction rather than a relationship. And it is to be welcomed that Prime Minister Modi, Minister Goyal have been very temperate and have not succumbed to sort of the outlandish up and downs of Donald Trump's pronouncements, because I think they realize that this relationship is among the most important in the world. The business of 100% tariffs in regard to Russia and Ukraine again has to be taken with a grain of salt, because President Trump has shown he's up and down on that as well. He said he was going to solve this on day one, that he and Putin were great friends and it would happen that way. That's not the way in which international relations needs to be conducted. I do subscribe to the proposition that India needs to show more leadership in regard to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. This is the greatest transgression of the principles of the UN Charter against non-imperialism, taking over somebody else's territory. And India has stood foursquare behind those principles. But this is not the way to do it. To shake a sledgehammer, say 100% tariffs, without really regard to what you're doing in regard to your own imports, in regard to what Europe is doing with its imports, much less China, which is really the fly in the ointment here. If China didn't stand up for Russia, they wouldn't have the wherewithal to continue yet for another day. So the pronouncements of the Prime Minister, the so-called thaw, are to be welcome, but we've got to get back to some semblance of organizational adherence to constitutional values rather than just going on what seems to be most in Donald Trump's interest in his drive to get the Nobel Peace Prize.
But do you then see a ray of hope that the trade talks could begin in a couple of weeks, given what the president says? Can India trust the president at face value, given all the contradictory statements that he's made in the last month? Do you believe that the trade talks now will resume? Or do the two leaders need to pick up the phone first and not just dialogue over social media?
India cannot take Donald Trump at face value. The relationship, which was moving along for the last 30, 35 years, in which I've been very deeply involved in, has been damaged more in 24 hours than we were able to make progress in 30 years. That having been said, Donald Trump is mercurial. He wants to do what's in his best interest. It's a very self-centered approach. Everybody knows that. And now I think that the negotiators, particularly on the Indian side, appreciate that. The problem is not with the negotiation and the deal. The problem is with Donald Trump and what he feels are in the interest of getting him a Nobel Peace Prize and making him what he thinks he is, the great man of the 21st century. There was, as you recall, almost a free trade agreement reached in Donald Trump's first administration. And my information is that both sides really had come to an agreement before Donald Trump came in and said, no, I'm going to get more. India cannot give up on its core interests, whether they be in dairy, whether they be in agriculture. But there are a lot of things that can be done around the edges, and I'm sure that Minister Goyal and the Prime Minister are working that. So what we hope to be able to navigate this very difficult situation and get back to the upward trend that we've had in U.S.-India relations for the last 30 years.
Well, Mr. Vickery, on that note, on that optimistic note, let's hope that we've seen some kind of light at the end of what's been a pretty dark tunnel over the last few weeks, given the kind of statements that have emanated from Washington. But as always, appreciate you joining me here on the news today.